Under the glittering lights of 1960s Hollywood, he was the man everyone wanted to be: charming, funny, untouchable. But behind the laughter that filled millions of living rooms, there was a secret life spiraling into darkness. This is not the story of fame, it's the story of what fame leaves behind when the cameras stop rolling. It was just past midnight in Scottsdale, Arizona. A lone street lamp flickered outside the Winfield Place apartments, casting thin blades of light across the quiet parking lot. Inside Building 132, Apartment 132A, a television hummed faintly, filling the dark with the ghostly echo of canned laughter. The same laughter that once made America fall in love with Bob Crane. But tonight, that sound felt wrong, hollow, distant, like a memory trapped in static. On the kitchen counter lay a half-finished cup of coffee, its surface cooled to glass. A script rested beside it, the pages bent and creased, a pen poised mid-sentence, as though the writer had simply stepped away for a moment. Yet the stillness in the room told a different story. The air carried a weight, a silence that didn't belong. Curtains swayed slightly, though no window was open, and in the narrow hallway, the glow from a bedside lamp painted the carpet in soft gold. It would have been an ordinary night, if not for the crimson shadow that marked the beginning of Hollywood's most unsettling mystery. Bob Crane, the beloved star of Hogan's Heroes, would never rise again. The discovery came late the next morning, June 29, 1978. Friends expected him on set for a rehearsal. He never arrived. Calls went unanswered. By noon, the sun hung mercilessly over the desert as a friend pushed open the door to 132A. What he saw inside would haunt Scottsdale police for decades. The scene didn't fit the man they knew. Charming, quick with a joke, every bit the TV hero. The body was found beside the bed, a brutal wound on the side of his head. No sign of forced entry. No screams reported, only the faint smell of aftershave, film reels stacked near the nightstand, and the flicker of a camera's reflection caught in the mirror. It looked almost staged, like a final performance frozen in time. To the world, Bob Crane was the man who made war funny. Hogan's Heroes had turned him into a household name, with every grin, every quip perfectly timed. But away from the studio lights, he was living another story entirely. A hidden obsession with filming his own private world, one he thought no one would ever see. That dual life, actor by day, shadow by night, was something few understood. Hollywood had always been a city of masks, but Crane's mask was starting to slip. Friends noticed he was different in the months before his death. Quieter, distracted, watching the world as if it might vanish at any second. There were whispers of a man always filming, always watching, of parties behind closed doors, filled with the glow of cameras and the hum of secrecy. For Crane, the camera wasn't just a tool, it was a companion, a witness to everything he couldn't say out loud. And maybe in the end, it witnessed too much. He had come to Scottsdale for a theater production, hoping to rebuild what fame had taken. The town was quiet, sun-baked streets, local diners, a far cry from the frenzy of Los Angeles. To the locals, Bob was polite, approachable, even humble. He signed autographs, posed for photos, and laughed easily. No one imagined that behind the easy charm, he was being followed by the ghosts of his own creations, friends, and one man who blurred the line between companion and threat. As night fell on June 28th, he drove back to his apartment after dinner. Witnesses remembered him smiling, "Come," waving to a stagehand. Nothing unusual until you realized it would be the last wave he'd ever give. The desert air that night was warm, heavy. Somewhere, a car idled briefly, then drove away. In the apartment, the light switched off. And by morning, one of Hollywood's brightest faces had been turned into its darkest enigma. Police would search for answers. Friends would turn on friends. The camera tapes would vanish. And decades later, people would still ask, who really killed Bob Crane? Was it revenge, obsession, or something born from the same fame that made him a legend? Because in Hollywood, every light casts a shadow, and Bob Crane's shadow had finally caught up to him. The cameras loved him long before the world knew his name. In the 1950s, radio was where his voice first came alive. Smooth, quick, endlessly charming, Bob Crane became a familiar sound across Los Angeles airwaves. He could make a room laugh without ever stepping inside it. The microphone was his first stage, and through it, he learned the art of timing, of pulling people in with a perfectly placed pause. That voice, filled with warmth and wit, would become his ticket into the glittering halls of television. By the early 60s, television executives began to notice him. He had that spark, the effortless humor that made an audience feel safe, even when he was teasing them. It was during this time that Bob's world began to shimmer with opportunity. He landed small roles on shows like The Donna Reed Show, where his boyish charm and ease with the camera made him an instant favorite. But he wanted more. Hollywood had a way of whispering to men like him, promising bigger lights, bigger rooms, and a kind of immortality that only the screen could give. Then came the role that would define him forever. Colonel Hogan, the quick-thinking, smooth-talking leader of prisoners in a World War II camp, a man who could outsmart anyone with a grin. Hogan's heroes turned Bob Crane into a star overnight. The irony was almost poetic, playing a man trapped in captivity while, in real life, his fame was slowly building a cage of its own. The laughter that filled living rooms across America hid the growing shadows that would one day swallow him whole. The show's success was intoxicating. Bob was everywhere. Interviews, parties, premieres. He was charming, magnetic, a man who made everyone feel seen. Yet, behind every flash of a camera, there was another camera waiting for him. What began as a fascination with photography and film slowly evolved into something deeper, something more personal. He started recording everything. Moments backstage, parties with friends, private encounters behind locked doors. For Bob, the camera was no longer just a tool of his profession. It was an extension of his desire to control the narrative of his own life. People close to him described him as endlessly curious, always smiling, always with a camera nearby. It was his comfort and his curse. Hollywood adored him, but as his fame grew, so did the weight of his secrets. There were whispers now, rumors of tapes, of women unaware they were being filmed, of a private life lived dangerously close to exposure. But in the late 60s, in a world obsessed with glamour and rebellion, few dared to look too closely. Then, as suddenly as it had lifted him, fame began to drift away. Hogan's heroes ended, and with it, the easy glow of stardom. Hoffer slowed, the phone rang less, and Bob found himself chasing the same adoration that had once chased him. He turned to theater, hoping to reclaim the feeling of being wanted, of being someone. But the lights on stage could not drown out the hum of his past. He carried it with him, reel after reel, stored away in cases labeled only by dates and initials. Somewhere along the way, he met a man who would become a permanent figure in his story, a man fascinated by technology and cameras, someone who shared Bob's interest in recording. Two outsiders, they looked like friends, collaborators even. But to those who watched closely, it was clear that their bond was built on something darker. Bob had found a mirror of himself, and the reflection was beginning to distort in every performance. Every handshake, there was still that famous smile. But indeed he was watching, calculating, always aware of who might be watching him in return. Hollywood had given him everything, a name, a legacy, and a secret too heavy to carry. And somewhere deep inside, he must have known that secrets like his never stay hidden forever. As the 70s crept forward, his life began to feel like a film looping endlessly. Rehearsal, performance, silence. The laughter from the television sets grew faint, replaced by the sound of tape spinning, of private footage no one else was meant to see. Each night, he returned home, surrounded by memories he had filmed but could never erase. The camera light blinked in the dark like a heartbeat, constant and watchful. He told himself it was harmless, just memories, souvenirs of a life. But Hollywood has a cruel way of collecting debts, and Bob Crane's bill was coming due. Somewhere, In the desert quiet of Scottsdale, fate was already waiting for him. The friendship began like a spark in the dark. Bob met him at a time when both men were searching for purpose. One was a fading star, clinging to the glow of old fame. The other a man obsessed with machines and the power of recording them. To Bob, this new companion seemed harmless, even fascinating. He introduced himself as someone who could help fix cameras, edit film, and experiment with new video technology. In the beginning, that's all it was, two men playing with toys that could capture moments forever. But as weeks turned into years, something shifted. Their friendship became less about curiosity and more about indulgence. The boundaries blurred. They recorded everything: people, parties, encounters no one else was supposed to see, in the privacy of hotel rooms and apartments. The camera became their silent third presence, always watching, always remembering. For Bob, it was an escape from loneliness, a way to hold on to the feeling of being admired. For the other man, it was something darker, something possessive. Friends began to notice the change in Bob. His once effortless charm had become forced, almost desperate. His laughter lingered too long. He had started arguing more, isolating himself from old colleagues who disapproved of his habits. He still performed in small theater productions, but the spark that once made him shine on screen was dimming. He looked tired, older than his years, as though something unseen was pulling him under. The tapes were his obsession now. Hours and hours of footage, neatly labeled, hidden in boxers, cataloged like trophies. He told himself it was art, a way to preserve life's pleasures before they faded. But deep down, even he knew it was something else. The camera had turned from his companion to his captor. It demanded more moments, more risks, more of his soul. The man he called a friend began showing signs of jealousy. Possessiveness cloaked as loyalty. He wanted to be in every scene, every plan, every trip. He spoke about Bob as if he owned a piece of him. When Bob tried to distance himself, arguments erupted, quiet but sharp, filled with unspoken threats and unfinished sentences. There were moments when Bob's smile slipped, and for a brief second, fear flashed in his eyes. Still, he couldn't completely walk away. Fame had taught him to keep people close, even when they frightened him, and maybe somewhere deep down, he thought he could control this friendship the way he controlled his camera, frame by frame, take by take. But human beings don't fit neatly into frames, and Bob's world was beginning to crumble. By 1978, he was performing in a small play in Arizona. The desert sun was unforgiving, and the crowds were smaller. But Bob was determined to start over. He talked about writing a book, directing, even teaching. He wanted to reinvent himself, to leave behind the shadow that had followed him for years. But the past has a way of traveling faster than hope, and it had already arrived in Scottsdale before he realized it. He called his old friend, invited him to visit, perhaps out of habit, perhaps out of guilt. They laughed, they talked, they shared dinner with the cast and crew. Nothing seemed wrong. But when the night ended and the desert air cooled, the tension between them hung heavy, invisible yet suffocating. Neighbors would later say they heard faint sounds, maybe a thud, maybe the television. Nothing alarming, just the quiet hum of another Arizona night. But inside apartment 132A, something irreversible happened. The next morning, sunlight slipped through the blinds, casting thin golden lines across the room. The coffee cup sat untouched. The television was still on, and the man who had once made the world laugh lay silent. The final scene of his life captured not on film, but in memory. The morning light did not bring comfort. It spilled into the small apartment like an unwanted guest, revealing every trace of what the night had taken. Police arrived quietly, unsure of what they were walking into. The scene was both ordinary and chilling, the kind of place where silence seemed too loud. There were no signs of struggle, no broken glass, no chaos. Only the stillness of a life suddenly paused and a room filled with echoes that no one could quite explain. Reporters arrived soon after, their cameras flashing like vultures, circling over fresh tragedy. They whispered his name as if afraid to disturb him, yet eager to claim the story. Hollywood's golden boy, found dead under mysterious circumstances. It was the kind of headline, "The city devoured." But beneath the glamour of speculation lay a truth that refused to show itself. The investigation began quietly. But with each question, the line between fact and performance blurred a little more. Friends were called in for questioning, their faces pale and strained. They spoke of Bob as kind, generous, funny, though in recent months, more secretive. They mentioned his cameras, his recordings, his fascination with documenting everything. Detectives searched the apartment, finding tapes, film reels, and pieces of equipment few had seen before. It felt less like a home and more like a private archive, a museum of a life lived through the lens. One name appeared again and again in their notes. The friend who had spent the last night with him, the one who knew the cameras, who shared his interests, who had been there just hours before everything ended. He was calm unquestioned. Perhaps too calm. His words rehearsed, his eyes steady. He claimed to have left around midnight, that Bob was alive when he walked out the door. There was no proof to contradict him, but something about his composure unsettled everyone in the room. The case dragged on. Evidence was gathered, then lost. Tapes went missing. Fingerprints blurred. Memories twisted over time. Hollywood moved on. As it always did. New shows, new scandals, new stars to worship. Bob Crane's death became another whispered story in the long corridor of the city's tragedies. But for those who knew him, the questions never faded. Who had a reason to kill him? Was it jealousy, fear, or the desire to erase what had been recorded? The friend disappeared from the spotlight, living in quiet shadows while rumors grew like vines. Some said the police had their man but lacked the proof. Others claimed the truth was far stranger, that what happened in that room was the result of secrets only the cameras had seen. Whatever the answer, it was buried beneath time, sealed away with the reels that never resurfaced. Years passed, and the case turned cold. But every so often, when old clips of Hogan's heroes played on television, someone somewhere remembered the smile, the charm, and the tragedy behind it. The laughter felt heavier now, tainted by what followed. It was as though the man who once brought joy to millions had become a ghost, forever trapped between the world of light and the dark he could never escape. In Hollywood, stories fade, but myths endure. Bob Crane's story became one of those myths, retold in bars, film sets, and late-night interviews. Some saw him as a victim, others as a man undone by his own obsessions. But no one could deny the haunting irony that a man who spent his life behind and before the camera would have his own death become the most replayed scene of all. Even now, the mystery lingers, the grainy flicker of old footage, the quiet hum of forgotten tapes, the sense that somewhere, hidden in a reel that was never meant to be seen, lies the answer. Maybe the truth was recorded after all, trapped forever in film that has long since turned to dust. Or maybe it was never about the truth at all. Maybe it was about a man who lived too brightly, and a world that watched him burn without looking away. Time mowed on, but the shadow of that apartment never really left Hollywood. It hung in the air like a faint whisper, echoing through studios and dressing rooms, carried by those who remembered him. Years after his death, filmmakers and journalists tried to reconstruct the story, piecing together fragments of a man who seemed to live two lives at once. But every version contradicted the next, as if Bob himself had directed the confusion, leaving behind a puzzle that could never be solved. He had become both a cautionary tale and a fascination. To some, he was the victim of his own temptations. To others, a symbol of how fame devours those who dare to chase it too far. His name, once shining in gold on studio doors, became a headline people whispered rather than celebrated. The laughter from his old shows still played on television, but it carried a strange melancholy now. Every smile, every line of dialogue, felt like an echo from a world that no longer existed. In his final years, Bob had tried to find peace. He spoke of redemption, of starting fresh, of letting go of the habits that had trapped him. But the past doesn't loosen its grip easily. Every frame he ever recorded seemed to follow him, as though the camera itself had become his judge. And perhaps that was the cruelest irony of all, that a man who loved filming every detail of his life, would leave behind a death that no one could capture clearly. The people who once worked with him aged, retired, and passed on, taking pieces of his story with them. Files went missing, reports were misplaced, memories faded. What remained was a haunting story told in green rooms and documentaries, never quite the same twice. Hollywood has always been a city of reinvention, but for Bob Crane, reinvention came too late. His children and loved ones tried to protect what was left of his image, to separate the man they knew from the headlines that haunted him. But the world rarely allows for neat separations. Every time his name resurfaced, so did the same photographs, the same theories, the same endless speculation about what really happened in apartment 132A. It was as if the story itself refused to die, feeding on curiosity long after everyone involved had gone silent. There are nights, even now, when old film reels play in dimly lit bars, and someone will glance at the screen and whisper, "That's Bob Crane." For a moment, the room grows still. The face on the screen smiles, confident, alive, unaware of how his story will end. Then the scene changes, the audience laughs, and time moves forward again. But that moment of stillness lingers, like a heartbeat caught between memory and regret. Hollywood has buried many of its secrets beneath the glitter of its success, but some refuse to stay buried. Bob Crane's story is one of them. It's not just the story of a man's fall from grace, but a reflection of how fragile the pursuit of fame can be, how quickly admiration turns to isolation, and how the spotlight can become a cage. He once said that he loved to make people laugh because laughter made him feel alive. In the end, that laughter became his ghost, echoing long after the man himself was gone. And somewhere, in the quiet hum of an old television set, his smile still flickers, caught forever between light and shadow, just like the city that made him. The cameras always loved him. Every frame seemed to catch that spark, the one that made audiences lean forward a little, the one that turned ordinary scenes into something larger than life. In the beginning, it felt like magic. He could walk into a studio and the air itself would change, full of promise, full of noise, full of dreams, too big to name. The city rewarded people like him. It built entire illusions around their faces, lifted them high, and told them the applause would never fade. But behind the lights, the sound stages were quiet. The laughter from the set dissolved into the hum of fluorescent bulbs and the faint smell of fresh paint. Fame was a strange thing, he thought. It touched you like a hand on your shoulder, warm for a moment, then gone, leaving only the echo of its weight. He learned to chase that warmth, to keep it close, even when the days blurred together. He had once been a boy who wanted nothing more than to be heard. The microphone came first, then the cameras, then the faces of millions. The more the world watched, the less he recognized himself in the reflection. He played roles meant to make people laugh, but in the silence between takes, he felt something else stirring, a restlessness that fame couldn't soothe. The parties arrived with the contracts, rooms filled with champagne and chatter, faces shining with curiosity and envy. He moved through them like a practiced illusionist, charming everyone, hiding everything. It was easy at first. Every secret seemed small compared to the applause. But the nights grew longer, and the secrets heavier. People whispered about the way he filmed everything, how he needed to capture what others tried to forget. They said he was fascinated by memory itself, afraid that if he stopped recording, he might disappear. The city watched him rise, and then, slowly, it began to watch something else crack. Fame had a way of magnifying everything, the light and the darkness alike. What had once seemed daring began to look desperate. He smiled through it all, the way he always had, even as the applause started to sound like a warning. There were moments when he would stand before the mirror and stare, waiting to see the man everyone else saw. The reflection was flawless, familiar, but something in the eyes had changed. It was as though the image no longer belonged to him. Behind that perfect grin was a growing shadow, something silent and patient, waiting for its turn in the spotlight. In the middle of a crowded studio, surrounded by laughter and bright lights, he felt utterly alone. Somewhere inside the applause, He could already hear the whisper of the ending. The applause didn't fade overnight. It dimmed, the way twilight fades into evening slowly, beautiful and impossible to notice until the world is already dark. He was still there, in the glow of the cameras, but something in the way people looked at him had changed. The laughter was polite now, the smiles thinner, the handshakes quicker. The city that once adored him was learning a new language, one that spoke in ratings and rumors. He tried to ignore it at first. He worked harder, smiled wider, pretended the cracks were part of the act. But even the mirror began to lie. Every morning he would stare at his reflection under the harsh studio lights and feel like he was watching a stranger, preparing to play his part. The fame that once felt like a warm spotlight now pressed down like heat from an unforgiving sun. The whispers followed him home. They began as soft curiosities, stories traded between assistants and journalists who owed him favors. People said he had grown obsessed with documenting everything. They said his house was filled with film reels, each one labeled and stacked like a private museum of moments no one else was supposed to see. The truth was more complicated. He filmed because it made him feel real. Every frame was proof that he had lived, laughed, existed. But over time, the recordings became a kind of confession. Silent, relentless, inescapable. Friends stopped visiting. Invitations dwindled. The ones who stayed were the ones who wanted something. They came with smiles and ideas, with flattery that felt rehearsed. He played along, knowing it was all temporary. There was one man who seemed different, quiet, attentive, always ready to help. He laughed at the same jokes, offered advice when others vanished. But even that friendship felt like a performance. Two actors reading from the same invisible script. He didn't notice when the cameras started to feel heavier. The laughter that once filled his home had turned into the hum of machines. Sometimes, in the middle of filming, he would stop and stare into the lens, as if hoping to see himself inside it. There was nothing there, only the faint reflection of the room behind him, the walls, the shadows, the life he had built and trapped inside those tapes. The city outside his window never slept. Neon signs flickered like warnings, stretching across empty boulevards that once knew his name. He walked those streets, sometimes, late at night, unnoticed in the glow of passing headlights. The air smelled of rain and gasoline, and the silence felt heavier than any crowd. One night, standing under a buzzing streetlight, he wondered what it would be like if the cameras simply stopped. No applause, no lenses, no eyes watching from the dark. Just quiet. But he knew himself too well. Silence would destroy him faster than scandal ever could. Inside the reels, the laughter kept playing. Faces frozen in time, moments of joy now blurred by age and guilt. He couldn't bring himself to watch them anymore, but he couldn't throw them away either. They were proof that he had mattered once, that the world had cared. The quiet friends still came by, still smiled, still helped him fix the flickering lights and rearrange the tangled cords. The man never asked for anything. But behind those calm eyes was something unreadable, something that made the air around them hum with tension. Somewhere deep down, he knew that every friendship in this city came with a price. And one night soon, he would learn exactly how high that price could be. There comes a point when every performance stops feeling like art and starts feeling like survival. For him, that moment arrived quietly. The laughter tracks on his shows began to sound like ghosts, their cheer too perfect, too empty. The audience still watched, but their eyes held something different now, something curious, almost hungry. They loved him, but they also wanted to see him falter. The city always did. He moved through his days like a man pretending to remember his lines. Mornings came with coffee and silence, afternoons with cameras that no longer flattered, and nights that stretched on forever. The reels filled his house until there was barely room to walk. Each one contained fragments of a life he couldn't let go of. He told himself it was art, but somewhere deep down he knew it was an obsession. The friends still visited. Sometimes they would sit for hours in the living room, the projector humming between them, casting silent images across the wall. Faces flickered in black and white, frozen smiles from long ago. The friend always watched with polite fascination, asking questions that felt rehearsed, as if the answers had already been written somewhere else. He didn't see it then, but trust had become a fragile thing. Every conversation felt like a scene played for an unseen audience. Every laugh felt measured. He began to wonder what was being recorded, and by whom. The camera that had once been his companion now felt like an eye he couldn't escape. There were arguments, though no one ever called them that. Short exchanges that lingered too long. Moments of quiet that felt heavier than words. The friend grew distant, unpredictable, sometimes silent for days before appearing again as if nothing had happened. Something was shifting, small at first, then sharper, like a note gone slightly off key. He started to notice things out of place. A film reel left open, a light left on, a door that creaked when it hadn't before. He told himself it was exhaustion, the cost of too many sleepless nights, but the feeling wouldn't leave him. He was being watched, maybe not by cameras this time, but by something colder, something that waited. The show ended. The applause finally faded for good. There were no offers, no calls, no scripts. The silence he once feared had come at last, and it was louder than anything he had ever known. He spent his nights wandering the house, moving from room to room, surrounded by the ghosts of his own making. Every flicker of light, every hum of the projector, seemed to whisper reminders of what he had been. The city outside kept glowing, alive with new stars, new scandals, new faces for the world to adore and devour. And in that glow, he began to realize that fame doesn't end when the cameras stop. It lingers even in decay. It clings to the air like perfume, sweet and poisonous. The friend came one final time. The visit was quiet, polite, and almost tender. They spoke about the old days, about the laughter, about how strange it all felt now. Then came a silence that neither of them knew how to break. The hum of the projector filled the space between them, flickering lights spilling across the walls like restless ghosts. Somewhere in that moment, something irreversible passed between them, a thought, a look, a decision. The air felt heavy, the night far too still. Outside, the city slept. Inside, the film kept rolling, capturing everything and nothing all at once. The night began like so many others, heavy with heat and the low hum of a restless city. He had grown used to the rhythm of the dark, the way it wrapped itself around his home like a curtain. Inside, the air smelled of film and dust. The reels still lined the walls, hundreds of them, silent witnesses to a life that had become its own archive. He moved among them like a ghost, wandering through memories he could not escape. The friend arrived late. There was no appointment, no warning, just the sound of a car pulling into the driveway, the quiet knock at the door, the same polite smile that had once felt reassuring. They talked the way people do when they are pretending not to notice the tension between them. The words were light, but the silence underneath was heavy and sharp. He poured drinks. The glasses caught the reflection of the television light to shimmering ghosts clinking together. They spoke about work that no longer existed, about plans that would never be made. The laughter that once filled the house seemed to echo from another lifetime at some point. The projector started again, uninvited. Its beam cut through the darkness, spilling images across the room. Faces flickered on the wall, blurred by motion and age. The friend's gaze lingered on the pictures longer than usual, their expression unreadable. He watched, too, unable to look away, the light strobing across both their faces like a heartbeat. Then the friend said something. Question. Remark. Something small, ordinary. And yet the room changed. The words hung in the air, harmless on their own but soaked with everything they did not say. He answered too quickly. The friend replied too softly. The silence that followed was no longer polite. It was something else, something waiting. A tournée? Hawaii. Maybe to refill the glass. Maybe to stop the film. But the tension had already filled the space like static before a storm. The city outside was alive with noise. Cars passing, people laughing, but inside the house time had slowed to a whisper. The flickering light from the projector painted their shadows across the wall, two shapes merging, twisting, separating. Again, for a moment, they almost looked like one. When the light finally went out, the room fell into darkness. And in that darkness, the city kept breathing, unaware that something had just changed forever. Hours later, the sun began to rise, spilling pale light across the quiet neighborhood. Birds called softly, as if reluctant to disturb the stillness. Inside the house, the projectors stood silent. The film reel unspooled on the floor, tangled and gleaming like a trail left behind by memory itself. Somewhere, far away, a phone began to ring. And so the spotlight fades. What once glittered on camera is now just a whisper caught between reels of forgotten film. In Hollywood, every smile hides a secret. Every success leaves a shadow. Some stories end in applause, others in silence. But all of them ask the same question: how much of a soul can fame afford to burn before the light goes out?